You're paying top dollar for fresh Florida grouper, but what if I told you it's not even close to what you think it is? Even the restaurant has no idea where that fish came from. But one thing's for sure, it's definitely not local. This is happening all over Florida. Restaurants are pulling a bait and switch, serving up cheap mystery fish and passing it off as grouper. And yeah, they're charging full price for it. And the fish isn't the only thing these restaurants are scamming you on. In this video, I'll show you just how widespread this scam really is, how restaurants have been getting away with it for years, and how to tell if the grouper on your plate is actually the real deal, so you don't end up getting ripped off. Let's jump in. Grouper is one of the most popular fish on menus in Florida. People love it because it's fresh, flaky, and mild, plus it's local. It's the kind of fish that shows up in sandwiches, tacos, and grilled entrees across the state, especially in beach towns. But here's the problem. A lot of the time, it's not real grouper at all. Restaurants across Florida have been caught selling fake grouper, and this isn't just some random mistake. It's been going on for years. Back in 2006 and 2007, the Florida Attorney General's office tested 24 restaurants in Tampa Bay. Out of those, 17 were busted for mislabeling. That's over 70%. They were serving up fish like tilapia or swai, which is an Asian catfish, and calling it grouper. In a later study done by Oceana in 2012, they found 31% of seafood in South Florida was mislabeled, and grouper was one of the worst offenders. In some cases, they were even passing off king mackerel, which has high mercury levels, as grouper. And this problem isn't going away. A 2024 report said seafood fraud is still going strong, especially with high-demand fish like grouper. But this isn't just a Florida problem. Estimates from that same year show that around 20% of all grouper sold in the U.S. is mislabeled, and more than 9 million pounds of so-called grouper are imported into the country every year. That's a lot of mystery fish being passed off as the real thing. Why? Because real grouper costs restaurants $8 to $14 a pound wholesale, and that's before they cook or plate it. Tilapia or swai costs about half that, and a lot of it's imported frozen from Vietnam or China. And the sad part is, most people never notice, especially when they hide it under all kinds of tasty toppings. But here's the nasty part. Grouper are apex predators. They eat fresh fish, crabs, squid, and shrimp in clean, open water. That's why they taste sweet and clean. Tilapia and swai? Not the same story. Most are farm-raised in murky ponds where they eat pellets, algae, and sometimes even waste. Swai is a bottom feeder. They suck up whatever's sitting on the bottom of the pond, so while you think you're eating a clean, Gulf-caught fish, you might actually be chowing down on something that lives in a muddy ditch. It's not just a ripoff, it's straight up gross. And the restaurant's pocketing the difference while you pay $25 for a fish that costs them $3 a pound. Pretty shady, right? But if you think that's bad, let's talk about shrimp, because this one's actually worse. A recent study by CD Consulting, a food safety company based in Florida, tested shrimp at 44 restaurants around the Tampa Bay area. They used genetic testing to analyze shrimp samples from each restaurant, checking if the shrimp were actually wild caught from the Gulf or cheap imported farm-raised substitutes. And out of all those places, only 2, Salt Shack on the Bay in Tampa and Stillwater's Tavern, one of my favorite spots in St. Pete, were serving the real deal. Wild-caught Gulf shrimp. That's it, just 2. That means 96% of the restaurants they tested were serving shrimp from overseas, and in most cases, they were still calling it local. What they were really dishing out was farm-raised shrimp from countries like India, Vietnam, and sometimes Ecuador or Thailand. These are mass-produced, low-quality shrimp grown in crowded ponds and treated with antibiotics or chemicals just to survive. And this stuff isn't rare. It makes up the bulk of what you'll find on restaurant plates across the state. Even if the menu shows a shrimp boat or says something vague like locally sourced, you got no guarantee it's from the Gulf of America. And let's be honest, most people don't ask. The big problem? It's not just that customers are being lied to. This is crushing Florida's shrimping industry. Local shrimpers have to compete with imported shrimp that costs half as much and floods the market. Restaurants want to keep prices down, so they buy the cheaper stuff, lie about it, and rake in the profit. And the people who are actually fishing the Gulf, doing it the right way, they're the ones that end up losing. It's hard enough to run a shrimp boat, but now they got to compete with frozen bags of farm-raised shrimp that were vacuum packaged in a warehouse in Asia. It's just not a fair fight. And you'd think this kind of seafood fraud would come with some real consequences. And technically, it does on paper. Florida law actually allows for some pretty tough penalties if a restaurant or supplier gets caught mislabeling seafood. We're talking up to a year in jail and a $5,000 administrative fine per violation under the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or FDACS. But here's the problem. Those penalties almost never get used, especially when it comes to shrimp. According to the CD consulting study, Florida tends to focus most of its enforcement on grouper, while shrimp fraud is basically flying under the radar. So even though shrimp is being mislabeled like crazy, barely anyone's getting in trouble for it. Now, at the federal level, the laws are even stricter. Under the Legacy Act or the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, you can face serious fines or even prison time for mislabeling seafood. In one case, back in 2011, a Florida company called United Seafood Imports was caught mislabeling over 1 million pounds of shrimp. The president of the company was sentenced to probation, and they had to pay a $200,000 fine. Sounds serious, right? But those kinds of crackdowns are super rare. Most of the time, enforcement gets bogged down in red tape, and prosecutors don't bother unless it's a huge case. And even then, fines often don't scare anybody. For big restaurants, a $5,000 hit isn't going to stop them from doing it again. And let's be real, most restaurants don't even worry about getting caught. There are no routine seafood inspections. Nobody's randomly showing up to swab the shrimp or test the grouper DNA unless a customer files a complaint and someone actually investigates. The restaurant's probably never going to hear a word about it. That's why this fraud keeps happening. The laws might sound strict, but without real enforcement, they don't mean much. So restaurants just keep taking the risk because there really isn't one. So picture this. You're sitting at a restaurant in Florida and you're craving grouper. Maybe a sandwich, maybe you want it grilled with a side of veggies. Either way, you're expecting the good stuff, right? Fresh, wild caught, straight from the Gulf. But how do you actually know it's real? Here's a few steps you can take. Start with the price. Real grouper isn't cheap. If you see a grouper sandwich or filet on the menu for anything under 20 bucks, that should raise a red flag. So unless they're giving it away for charity, a cheap menu price means it's probably a substitute like tilapia, swai, or catfish. Next, look at the texture and the way the fish breaks apart. Cooked grouper has big, firm, white flakes, almost chunky. It doesn't fall apart like mush. If the fish on your plate flakes off in tiny, soft pieces or looks super uniform, there's a good chance it's not grouper. And taste matters too. Grouper has a clean, mild flavor with a hint of sweetness. If what you're eating tastes muddy, overly fishy, or like it was pulled out of a river, it's probably one of those bottom feeders like swai or Asian catfish. And here's a sneaky trick restaurants use. They drown fake fish in seasoning or sauce. If your grouper's buried under blackened spices, slathered in citrus, or loaded with garlic butter, they might be trying to cover up the taste of something cheaper. And lastly, ask where it's from. Real groupers almost always caught in the Gulf of America or off the Atlantic coast. If your server says it's imported or gets vague with answers like, I'm not sure, or we get it from our distributor, that's a clue they don't want to say. Also pay attention to the wording on the menu. Anything labeled whitefish, grouper style, or fish sandwich with no specific name probably isn't the real deal. And if every plate coming out of the kitchen has the exact same fillet shape and size, that's another red flag. Real grouper fillets don't look like they came out of a cookie cutter. Processed frozen fish does. The best restaurants are proud of their seafood. They'll tell you what kind of grouper it is, red, black, or gag, and where it came from. They'll list the region, like Gulf caught or Florida wild. If a place avoids those details or gets defensive when you ask, that's your sign to skip it. You're paying top dollar, so don't be afraid to ask questions. If it doesn't feel right, trust your gut. It probably isn't grouper. Now, if spotting fake grouper sounds tough, shrimp's even trickier and way more common. A lot of the same rules apply, but shrimp fraud flies under the radar even more because people don't think twice about it. They just assume shrimp is shrimp. But in Florida, there's a big difference between wild-caught Gulf shrimp and the farm-raised stuff getting shipped in from across the world.
Shrimp kebabs, shrimp creole, shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad.
Start by asking where it came from. Just like with grouper, don't accept a lazy answer like, it's local. If a restaurant's really serving Gulf shrimp, they're gonna have packaging or an invoice that says exactly where it came from. Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, something specific. If they say they don't know or can't show you, odds are it's imported. Then look at how it's described on the menu. Watch out for vague language like shrimp platter or local style shrimp. That's not telling you anything. Real Gulf shrimp should be labeled clearly like wild caught Gulf shrimp or Florida caught. And don't be fooled by pretty menu designs or pictures of shrimp boats. Restaurants love to sell the story, even when the shrimp doesn't match. Price is another clue. Gulf shrimp today costs restaurants way more to buy. So if your shrimp dinner's under 15 bucks, there's a good chance it's not the real thing. That cheap price usually means it came from overseas, where shrimp are farmed in crowded, dirty ponds, then frozen and shipped over by the container load. And you can taste the difference. Real Gulf shrimp have a firm, snappy bite and a naturally sweet, salty flavor from the ocean. The fake stuff, it's mushy, bland, and sometimes has that weird chemical aftertaste. If all the shrimp on your plate are the exact same size and shape, that's a dead giveaway. Wild shrimp come in all kinds of sizes. They don't look factory made. Still not sure? Look up the restaurant online, check for reviews, search them on X, see what other people are saying. If someone's been burned by fake shrimp, they probably posted about it. All right, I'm gonna be real with you. I don't even like seafood. There, I said it. I wish I did like it, but I don't. And honestly, I almost skipped making this video because of it. But last week, I was out to dinner with some friends, and when I told them that the fish they just ordered might not actually be grouper, and the story behind it, they were shocked and had no idea this was happening. That's when I knew I had to talk about this. Because if you're spending good money to visit Florida, or you live here and you're taking your wife out for a nice dinner, you deserve to get what you're paying for. Real fish, real shrimp, not some cheap knockoff pulled from a dirty pond overseas. And hopefully the state of Florida starts cracking down on this mess so that people stop getting ripped off. Until then, you gotta ask questions, pay attention, and stay sharp, because fake seafood's everywhere. Now, if you thought fake seafood was bad, wait till you see what this store's doing. Click here to find out how they're secretly spying on you while you shop. And no, it's not just video cameras. The surveillance tech they're using is way more advanced than you'd ever expect. And most people have no clue it's even happening. Click here and I'll see you there.